Little office. This is Keith Andrews. I am the owner of Inner Voice Enterprises. I also am the host of The Gathering. And just to bring that up to speed, The Gathering you can find on Universal Portal of Peace every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can also pick us up on TuneIn, which is an application. Now, technology in this world isn't my strong suit, so TuneIn, you can find the download for it right on the website, and it is for, from what I understand, the iPads and the tablets. Now, what I'm here to talk about today is the culture of one specific race. Now, there's a lot of people out there that talk about races and talk about the aliens that are floating around and the ancient races, but it's all on a almost disconnected base. So my intention is to bring a little bit more of an understanding of what you're dealing with. Now, the race I'm referring to is the Ssrraazzaasians. They are a reptilian race. Roughly speaking, the adults are between 7.5 and 8 feet tall. The larger of them will have tails. That's because it grows in response to a balance point, really, although it is also used as a weapon. It is not prehensile, but it is usable. Now, we're going to start with the basics, okay, with the starting point of it as far as birth. Ssrraazzaasians do, on the whole, mate for life. That doesn't mean that they have some sort of a marriage ceremony or something to that effect. They choose their partner, and as long as it is working, as long as the connection is there, they stay together. Periodically they break apart, but they do not take another partner until they've clearly ended the first partner connection. Now, periodically they will end up, one will pass away, the other one is at that point free and clear to move forward, free and clear to find another partner. If they decide to go their separate way, they make an agreement. They simply go, we're not together anymore, and they move on. However, when they give birth, the children are born, they are hatched, they are born in eggs. As soon as when the mother is ready to deliver, she goes to the hatchery and she lays her eggs in the hatchery. Now, do understand that the individual parents do not know who their children are, because everybody lays their eggs in the same place. There are nursemaids or caretakers, if you will, that stay there. The younger Ssrraazzaasians, before they reach the age of majority, are left in the nursery. Some of them are left there to take care of the eggs, to make sure that there aren't problems, to watch what's going on. Now, as the eggs hatch, the hatchlings are actually able to walk the moment they get up. As a matter of fact, they're fully capable of thinking the moment they wake up. And as soon as they get out of their shell, and this is where it gets a little complicated on occasion, once a Ssrraazzaasian is out of its shell, it will turn around and wait for another. Like, it will get out, get sorted around, but when it sees an egg breaking, as soon as the head is outside of the shell, they don't do it before, they let them work at it to get their head out, because once they can get their head out, or at least get a big enough hole to call for help, and it's very important that they have to call for help. If they don't call for help, if a newborn does not call, the others will not step in to help it out. The moment it asks for help, whether it's a male or a female, the newborn hatchlings will turn around and start helping. The guardians, the nursery attendants, the hatchery attendants, do not help the eggs break open. That is the job of the little guys. All the hatchery attendants are for is to make sure if there is a complication, they're there to deal with it. They do not worry about whether or not an individual is the same size, the same color. If there is a problem, and once in a while there'll be a newborn, a new hatchling that doesn't survive. Now, if a hatchling doesn't survive the birthing process, they are sent down to the kitchen. They are not, it is not a funeral, it's not a mourning, because nobody knows whose child it really is. They're sent down to the kitchen. They are now dinner. Now, of course, the thing you got to understand is if a hatchling dies in the nursery, in the hatchery, then it is quite normal for the new hatchlings, and this is where the hatchery attendants are coming in. When a new hatchling passes away, the hatchlings that are still alive, that new one is fair game. That is food. But the trick for the hatchery attendants is they've got to make sure that it really is food. If it's food, it's okay. It can either be shipped out to the kitchen or the hatchlings themselves will deal with it. Now, once they are old enough to walk around and they're quite stable, then they get moved over to the nursery. That's where they start getting taught how to fight, how to behave, how to deal with each other. And again, it is a case of the entire community helps with the training. This is not a case of, that's my kid. That child, that hatchling, belongs to the community. Now, the other issue that comes up with the hatchlings is because they don't have their voice doesn't carry as well as they'd like, and the atmosphere does tend to get a little bit hard to hear in, but it's not hard to see in. They also have a color-coded band, a color-coded set of scales around their collar, around their neck, that is used for communication if their voice isn't carrying. The Ssrraazzaasians do have a very developed sense of eyesight, and they use the color coding to communicate on occasion, to pass on information, especially in a battle situation. Do understand that Ssrraazzaasians are a military base. They have a military heritage. And what that means is that any of the decisions that have to do with defense, that have to do with protection, that have to do with the hunting side of it, all of that is decided by the lead male. Any domestic considerations, whether we are talking about the healing methods, whether we're talking about technological developments, utilization of resources, whatever, that falls to the female. So it's a very, very nicely split society from that standpoint. Because the gravity on the planet, on their home planet, is so much higher than Earth, they are a lot stronger and a lot their skin, their armor, which they grow, is a lot more dense. And that's where you end up with the issue of them being very difficult to deal with on occasion. Now, one thing to keep in mind with them is that they have a very high honor system. When they are dealing with a conflict, it is a question of sort it out amongst yourselves. There is no real court situation like we have on Earth. They simply have an issue of work it out. If you can't work it out, if two Ssrraazzaasians get into a conflict that they cannot come to an amicable agreement on, they are locked in a pit. They are put inside what you would call a debating arena. Well, what they call a debating arena. And that is where, if the intellectual side of things cannot bring a reasonable solution to the problem, then the combat situation is taken into consideration. Combat does not mean if you enter the cage you have to die. It means you go into the cage and you're in there until you work it out. And if that means beating the daylights out of each other, or once in a while killing one of you, so be it. If both parties come out and they're still breathing, life goes on. They've come to an agreement, they carry on. If one of them dies, that one is sent to the kitchen. Okay, that is part of dinner. And because there's no such thing as the waste side of it. Okay, once a body passes, it's no longer a loved one, it's no longer a friend, it's deceased. When you're dealing with the overall societal structure, they are, by human standards, pretty much a commune. It's a case of, yes, they do mate for life, but the children are raised by everybody. And the children know this. They know it from the time they're born. They are also raised that if somebody calls for help, if you are not preoccupied with something critical, then you get up and go. But you don't call for help unless it's absolutely required. The Ssrraazzaasians only have 3 fingers and a thumb. All 3, well, technically all 4, are talent. They are very dense talents. And to give you an idea of how dense, if they were to try, and they've tried this, when they try and type on a human keyboard, they will punch holes in the keyboard. This is just the way things are. Okay, and it has to do with the molecular structure that they're working with. When they shake hands, which humans tend to grab hands, the Ssrraazzaasians grab forearms, but they also, when they're doing a proper shake, when they do a proper greeting, they will grab the forearm with their index, with their one talon, usually the first one next to the thumb, and it's placed right at the juncture of the elbow. And the reason for that is because it shows trust and honor. Grabbing there, because if you hit there, you'll disable the arm. So what you're doing when you shake hands is you're saying, I trust you. And for them, for Ssrraazzaasians, trust and honor are critical. They are absolutely imperative. If you cross a Ssrraazzaasian, you're not crossing it for a day or two. You're crossing it for life. Because they will not trust again. Now, where it comes to the Ssrraazzaasians themselves, they already know this. They're born knowing with honor being inbred. It is something that they are born with. Now, when it comes to conflict arguments, they do try and work it out amicably first. Quite often that doesn't work. So what ends up happening is it gets physical. They have very strong weapons, very, very heavy-duty weapons. Whereas if you look at the older style earth-based weapons, like the mace, basically it was a ball of steel on the end of a handle. Well, take a mace about the size of a medicine ball, or possibly the smaller ones would be the size of a basketball, but they are still solid metal. So you can picture what kind of damage that's going to do. And these are the types of weapons these people use in close combat. There are a great number of scientists in amongst them, because they do pride themselves on taking care of all of their children. And they see the children as any age, because in their eyes, everybody was a child. At some point, that's where they started. Even when they went through a period some time back and they were looking at the test tube alternative, even those are considered children. The moment they have independent movement, they're a child. They're free and clear to gain all the rights, all the respects that the rest of the society gets. The only difference between a child and an adult, where it comes to what they're able to get into, is, aside from the training side of it, if they can't reach it, they can't use it. If they're not permitted to physically pick it up, or not capable of physically picking it up is more to the point, then they cannot use it. Once they can get it off the ground, once they can pull the trigger on it, once they can reach what they're aiming for, it's fair game. They also do have, now much as they don't have to worry about who owns what house or who gets what food, that's all a balanced issue. They still have their own favorite weapons. They have their own favorite clothing, favorite stuff that belongs to them that is left alone by the others. Now, their legal system, in a nutshell, is pretty simplistic, because what it really boils down to is you break a law, you're dead. It's that simple. There's no appeal. Yes, some innocent people do get killed, absolutely, but once it is proven that you've broken a law, you've now broken the trust of society, and they're not interested in trying to rebuild that trust. They're not interested, or not focused on getting things sorted around and saying, hey, you screwed up. You knew when you were born that was wrong. You've been told all the way through your educational years that was wrong. You did it anyway, your problem. And since there is no way of going, oh, this is who it is, without doing a lot of genetic research, since they don't have family trees they worry about, there is no mourning process aside from, we have had to put somebody to death, and therefore let us examine what happened so we can make sure we don't have that same problem again. That's pretty much the way their legal system works. There are no people saying, oh, but he was nice. Because if he was nice, he wouldn't have broken the law, is basically their philosophy. The leaders, the council, are elected. It is a case of when they go to change council, it's not like you serve 4 years or you serve 2 years. It's a case of, okay, you've got the job, and as long as you're doing a good job, we'll leave you alone. If you're not doing a good job, then we are going to have you removed one way or the other. Either we will start by telling, a Ssrraazzaasian group will start by telling the individual they're not happy with that it's time for them to step down. And there does have to be a certain number of available adults. Well, in all fairness, available people that can speak. There has to be a majority of them saying, and it's got to be a clear majority. In other words, for a councilman to be forced to step down requires a 75% agreement. But not 75% of the population. 75% of the ones that choose to put their vote in, or to put their 2 cents in. If 75% of the people that have come to the box have said step down, then that individual, if they don't step down, will be killed. Right then, right there. They get one option. You're being asked to step down, and understand they're told as soon as their name hits the box that people are starting to look for their resignation. So much as it may seem cold, it's a very, very evolved method. They're given the option of stepping down. If they do, they carry on with their life. There's no shame in being asked to step out of a position from the Ssrraazzaasian standpoint. But there is a problem with refusing to step down when the good of the community dictates that it's got to happen. When somebody passes away while they're in council, there is no big ceremony. There is just simply a case of, okay, ship him down to the dining hall, salvage what you can, cook the rest, and whatever belonged to him, there's no will process. There's no, unless you have specifically, if a Ssrraazzaasian actually takes the time to say, when I die you can have this, which is what usually happens with heirlooms, then it'll get passed on. If there's no will written, then it's totally, everything gets tossed back into the community pot and it gets redistributed as it's required. If there is a will written, there is no arguing with it. There is no appeal. There is no, that's not fair. That is what is written. That is what is done. So whether somebody dies in council or is asked to step down and gets done in, or whether they die of old age, as long as whatever they died of was not an illness, was not a communicable illness, then they are put on the dinner table. If it is a communicable illness, then they are disposed of. Usually they're thrown into the fusion reactor. Again, these people do not waste. Okay, now the other thing that they do look at when it comes to the political side of things, they do look at the politics from a perspective of how do you get along with the other communities of other races so that everybody can get ahead, so everybody can benefit. Politics is not for them a battle to see who has the most money or who has the best ideas as compared to the other person, but it's literally who has the best ideas. There are no political parties per se, not as humans tend to see them. It's not like there's liberals and conservatives and Democrats and Republicans. It is strictly, if you're having a political party, that means a bunch of politicians got together and had a party. That's it. There's no such thing as a long-lived crooked politician. Because if he's crooked, even a child has the right to challenge his or her position. It's literally that simple. So the medical side of it is also taken care of from the perspective of, if you're hurt, you're treated. If it is assessed that you're going to die, that the wounds are too grievous to take care of, to correct, then you're terminated. You're not left to die, you're not left to suffer. They do not believe in amputating a limb in order to preserve the body. If a Ssrraazzaasian ends up with a broken back that isn't likely to heal, and bear in mind their medical is advanced enough that many broken backs do heal, but if they feel that it's broken to the point that it won't heal, so that you have to be on mobility assistance or you have to have a care worker take care of you, you're dinner. Now, if it's not a question of automatically you broke your back, you're cooked. It's a question of if the doctors to start with come to the conclusion that they don't see a foreseeable solution, then they will take it to the council, and if the council agrees, then the council will say, nope, we see what you're doing, clear the bed, terminate. And there is no plea bargaining, but then the families don't go to the council and say, oh, we really want him to live. That isn't the way their society works. So, all in all, what you're looking at is a society, the Ssrraazzaasian society, starts from the very beginning knowing it is best to help your neighbor than hinder. If you break a law, you have no right. You're hooked. There is no appeal. It is strictly, you broke the law, therefore you can no longer be trusted, therefore we're not keeping you around. You're no longer of any use except as food. And they do the same thing with other races. They don't specify that this is just the way we do it with our race. If a different race were to call a Ssrraazzaasian out into battle, and they were to challenge them, everybody else steps back and lets it happen, and whatever happens, happens. If, however, somebody jumps a Ssrraazzaasian, as in attacks it without provocation, without warning, then everybody jumps in. And you can have a pretty messy situation in a real hurry, especially for the guy that started the fight. So we are looking at yes, they are military, as in they have a lot of discipline, a lot of self-discipline. They do believe that once the body is dead, it's fodder. It's no longer of any value as far as that goes. It's not something you need a shrine for. They do believe their soul will move on and end up in another body somewhere. They don't worry about where because, well, it no longer applies to the immediate world. And we will get, in another session, we will look into that in a little more detail, but essentially their belief is the soul is separate from the body, and therefore once the body is dead, it's very much to them like a starship collapsing. If you live through the crash, then you're not killed, and you're not, you're no less than you were just because the ship died. Same applies with the body. Once the body is dead, once it's no longer usable, it is put on the dinner table. So hopefully this gives you at least a rudimentary understanding of Ssrraazzaasian culture and a realization that they are not enemies of the human race. They are actually allies, but they are extremely high in their opinion of honor and of truth. They do not deal well with deception, and they are certainly not interested in taking over anybody's world. Their whole idea is expand, interact with other races, get to know them, learn from them, and teach them. So next time we talk about the Ssrraazzaasians, hopefully you'll have if you've had a chance to listen to this, you'll have a better understanding of how they operate. And for the time being, this is Keith Andrews, owner of Inner Voice Enterprises and the host of The Gathering, which takes place every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific Time on the Universal Portal of Peace. That's universalportalofpeace.com. Thank you so much for listening, and keep smiling.